Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we're going to be talking about the breed Old German Owl with Bill Henderson. Bill has been raising pigeons for over 50 years. He is a master breeder in the NPA, that's the National Pigeon Association, and in the Old German Owl Club. In the past, he has been the Eastern Vice President of the Old German Owl Club and is also a judge of the Old German Owl breed. So, Bill, thanks so much for coming on and talking Old German Owls with us today.
I'm happy to do it. I always enjoy talking about them.
So, been in pigeons for 50 years. Can you talk about your journey into pigeons and specifically how you got into Old German Owls?
When I was a kid, there was a gentleman down the street from my grandmother that raised pigeons. He had them on top of his garage, and I was just mesmerized by him. He's in Wendell Levy's book, The Pigeon, in the Syrian breed section. His name was Sam Shadid. He was a Syrian immigrant, and he had brought all these different breeds of pigeons with him when he came to the United States. And I used to go down the street. I'd kind of hide behind some bushes and just watch the pigeons fly and interact with each other. Of course, he knew I was there. And he ultimately gave me a pair of what's called Sabuni tumblers. They're very rare in this country. But I took them home. I was 7 years old, had a little coop that my dad put together for me, and I have literally had them ever since. That was in Norfolk, Virginia. I've relocated a number of times. When my father took on a new position, the pigeon hobby would stay with me, and I've had them ever since. Even during college, I didn't have them for a couple of years in college, but I lived in a duplex the last 2 years and actually had a little pigeon coop behind that duplex where I had them. I've had a lot of different breeds over the years and enjoyed them. I guess I became a serious breeder, so to speak, where I started to specialize and get more competitive. Back in the 80s, I became involved with the American Show Racer, which is a great breed. They were very popular at the time and very competitive. Being involved with that breed really taught me how to condition and breed pigeons and to show them. I was fortunate enough to become a master breeder in them. Unfortunately, that breed is not as productive, or they certainly weren't at that time. They had a lot of health issues, and I became frustrated because I only like to breed from a small number of pairs, 6 to 8 pairs each year, and I just wasn't producing enough young birds to be competitive. And I sort of stumbled onto the West of England tumblers and had them for about 15 years, and that's a great breed. I thoroughly enjoyed them. Again, got very serious about them, got my master breeder in them, traveled all over the country showing and judging them. And it was a great experience. But then I developed some issues with bird lung or pigeon lung. I was able to redesign my loft and open up the windows and change things around. But most importantly, I quit using a litter. I had quit using shavings or straw or whatever I needed to condition the muffs on the west, because the west of England is a muffed breed. I use the slatted flooring out of Europe, which is great because it helps eliminate the dust. The droppings go through there and wasn't nearly as dusty, and it was a lot more healthy. I was unable to keep the West, and on a whim, I got a pair of Old German Owls at one of the NPA Nationals. I bought them from a now real good friend of mine, Greg Pola. That was the start. I just was real intrigued by them and found them a delightful breed in the loft and fun to breed. Sort of went down the same path as I'd done before. I just got more and more competitive with them and really threw myself into the breed and have had them for about 16 years now.
I guess I didn't know that you were a master breeder in those other breeds as well. That's not easy to become a master breeder. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and you have to contribute something to that breed. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I had a lot of people that helped me along the way, and I learned a lot of things from other fanciers that had been very successful. And, it's more than a hobby to me. It's a passion. I've enjoyed the journey the whole time.
What can you tell us about the origin of this breed? Was it a breed created from a cross or just continually working on certain features?
It's been around a long time over in Europe, specifically in Germany. The original German name for it, which I can't pronounce, actually was interpreted as the little gull because they had a marking similar to a seagull. Over time, the name changed to Old German Owl. They came into this country, I'm going to say around 2000. A fellow in Michigan, John Nelson, imported quite a few, and they were a big hit. People gravitated to them quickly, and they became really popular. The club kind of took off, did really well, had a lot of people interested in them. And then this is just what I've learned since I've had them these last 16 years. The club went through some significant changes. There was some infighting, some problems that took place, and the breed really dropped in popularity. People just got out for whatever reason. That was before my time, so I can't really comment too much on that. But particularly in the last 15 years or so, they have really gained in popularity. The breed has changed where it's gotten a lot more attractive. The bird is more upright now, and it's just a real eye catcher at the shows. And we've got a very strong membership and active club now. It's really a great situation.
Well, I had no idea that it has only been in the States since like the 2000s. I really thought that it's been around for a long time. It's almost a common show breed right now. You see it at a lot of the shows, and the Old German Owl Club is a really strong and healthy club. I guess I assumed that was just going on a lot longer than 20 some years.
The first time I exhibited an Old German Owl in Louisville, and it would have been about 16 years ago, there were only two entered in the National Young Bird Show.
Wow.
And at one time, they would have a couple hundred. So that's how much it had declined. And now we are consistently one of the larger entries at Louisville every year, and certainly at the national and the major shows, whether it's Des Moines or Reading or the pageant. The Old German Owl generally has a real strong entry, 100, 150, 200 birds.
I definitely see them at the shows. They're there in force too, so that's really impressive. With that up and down, becoming really popular, then kind of falling away and getting really popular again. And you had mentioned that some of the features had changed on it. Have they changed the standard recently on the Old German Owl, or is that still going off of like an old German standard?
The standard was revised about 6 years ago, and because the original standard that had been interpreted from the German standard, it left a lot up to personal interpretation of the wording. And oftentimes, when things are translated from another language, you lose a little bit. And so we got together a committee and went through it and altered the standard to make it more specific about the type of bird that should be bred and developed. And then 3 years ago, we voted in a new standard picture as well. The old standard picture was not. It just wasn't effective. It just didn't show the bird in its best light. And the new picture is much, much more attractive. And we've gotten a lot of positive comments about it. And just the shape of the bird has changed. Initially, when I first got them in, they tended to be long. They tended to stand with their tail almost horizontal. The crests were small and way back on the back of the head. The heads tend to be pinched. It just wasn't a very attractive bird. And over time, it has become shorter, cobbier, more upright, has a nicer expression in the face, a fuller head, a nice full crest. It's really a first-rate showbird now.
Can you talk a little bit about what the standard calls for and how they're judged on the point system?
The standard is one thing that I like so much about our standard because it is a marked pigeon. You've got the wing shield that makes it so attractive. That's very difficult to get that shield the right color and the right number of feathers, et cetera, et cetera. And our standard makes a point of emphasizing that type and style take precedent over markings or color. And that, I think, has contributed to the type of bird that we have now. The markings are still important, don't get me wrong. But if there are two birds and a judge is looking at, and one of them is upright and just has a commanding presence, but maybe it only has 7 white flights on one wing and 9 on the other, and the other bird might be better marked. It's the standard ideal is 10 by 10, 10 white primary flights on each wing. Well, maybe it'll be 10 by 10, but if it's long and it's got a snipey head, or it's not quite as powerful or not as impressive as the other bird, then the better shaped bird is always going to win. And that's one thing that's really important about our standard. We put the same emphasis on the head and crest that we do on the body. We put a lot of emphasis on what we call general appearance. And that, again, is that type and style that catches a judge's eye. The current standard, which is available on the Old German Owl Club website, is, I feel like, a great document to follow. And the club also puts out a colored picture of the standard with the written standard around it. That's a great learning tool for newcomers, because they can look at the picture, they can read the standard, and apply it. They can apply the words to the picture.
I have seen that before. That is really neat to have it right there while you're looking at the picture, and you can read all the information right around it. That is a very good idea. Are there any kind of common faults that you're seeing with the old German owl at the shows, like repetitive issues that are coming along with the breed that need to be worked on?
Not really. There's not anything that, for example, we had a lot of open back birds at one time where the flight feathers would stick up through the secondary feathers and look like sails. And we also had very low setting crest, but those have generally, for the most part, have improved a great deal. You're always going to find some birds that you kind of shake your head and you wonder why the person spent the entry fee on them to put them in, but they're generally newcomers and they've gotten these birds and they're trying to learn. And so it's imperative that a judge be kind and patient and point out things to newcomers. But I don't know of any specific fault that runs throughout the breed. There are things that I'd love to tweak on all of mine. I've had multiple national champions, and not one of them has been exactly what I want to breed. I'm always trying to breed a better one.
So, talking about show, can you talk about what show prep goes into getting the old German owl ready for show?
Yeah, they're relatively easy to do that with. Now, they're primarily white with the shield markings. And let me add this. We also have a tail mark version. You don't see many. They're pretty rare. And we also have 2 accepted self colors. This is sort of unusual. This came from the original German standard. White selfs are allowed, and recessive red, but no others. And so no one's ever been able to explain that to me. And I have to wonder if it wasn't something that got lost in the original interpretation of the German standard, but it doesn't matter now. Those 2 self colors are available, and then the tail marks, which are rare. You just don't see many of them. Certainly the majority of birds shown are the shield mark. The bird body should be white, and we often have colored feathers down in the hock area. Many of those can be plucked prior to a show, and so they're not so obvious. The darker the bird, the more obvious they are. There's some trimming. The standard says that trimming is allowed, but it shouldn't be obvious. And that specifically relates to the crest. We don't want a real big, overpowering crest like you see in a nun or a helmet. We want a tighter thicker crest, and there's been some videos posted on YouTube of how to actually trim that crest. Do it with some manicure scissors, and it's a tedious process that once you get the knack of it, it doesn't take long at all. You learn how to do it, and you can do it in a subtle way where it's not obvious. Those are the two biggest show prep things that I do is I do trim the crest, and I will look for any foul feathers where they're in the white section of the birds. Occasionally, you'll have a white feather in the shield that can be plucked, but that's pretty much it. Now, me, I go the extra mile. I try and I tip the beak 2 days before, just so it'll be a little bit smoother looking and not quite as pointed. I'll do that with some fingernail clippers, and oftentimes I'll clip the toenails a little bit, just the tip of them, so the claw's not catching in the fabric of the base of in the judging cages. We usually use a piece of carpet or indoor outdoor carpet, something like that, and so the birds can station properly. And I don't want their claws to get caught in it, but those are sort of incidental things.
And how's this breed's temperament? Are they pretty wily, or are they a pretty docile breed?
They are pretty naturally tame. I have found that one thing that really attracted me to them was how easy they were to handle. Now, depending on most of my loft sections are relatively small, and so they're easy to catch. I handle them a lot as young birds. I talk to them, I kind of play with them, and they'll tame down very quickly. In fact, the cocks tend to get too tame, and they'll want to fight a little bit. It's a playful fighting, but they'll fight a little bit, particularly in the show cage. They're kind of showing off, and sometimes the hens are a little flirty. But that's my fault for handling them so much. But no, they have a very even temperament. They get along well with other breeds in a loft. I don't have any other breeds now, but I have in the past, and they'll stick up for themselves. It's funny. I've watched them pop a show racer or a show type racing homer, and they'll run them right out of the nest, and they're half the size. So they can fend for themselves in that regard, but they have what I consider a delightful personality.
You are only doing old German owls right now?
Yes,
Okay.
that's my only breed.
Can you talk a little bit about the loft setup that you have your old German owls in, and the kind of how you have it broken down?
I have a total of 6 sections. Like most pigeon guys, you never seem to have enough room. But my main loft, I have two 6x8 breeding lofts, and I do breed in individual pens. They're 32 inches square, and I have 4 on each side of those two 6x8 pens. I have bred owls in a community loft, and I've bred them in individuals, and they do fine in either one. I happen to have the individuals, and I'm retired, so time and the extra care to fool with them is not an issue for me. They breed equally well in either one. I have 2 holding pens that are 4x8 that I put extra birds in, extra cocks and hens, because I generally don't breed but from 8 pair. But I will hold over 4 or 5 cocks and hens that I feel like might be good enough to breed from. Maybe they're not quite as old, or maybe they're old breeders that I'm not really ready to get rid of yet, because I want to make sure the younger ones coming along will breed as good, if not better. And then I have 2 young bird pens. I think, let's see, one is 8x8, and the other one is only 4x6. They have large walk-in fly pens, so they can accommodate quite a few young birds.
And because they do have a shorter beak, how are they in regards to raising their young? Do you foster, or do they raise their own?
No, they'll raise their own babies. I will say, in my opinion, they are decent parents. They're not great. I wouldn't recommend them as feeders for a short-faced breed. I know some people that have done it, but for the most part, they do a decent job. I have found that some, especially young cocks, want to drive the hens back down on eggs a little too quick. I'd like for the babies to be 10 days, 2 weeks old before they do that. And some cocks will start driving them a little too early. And so they don't parent quite as well. I do on occasionally do some supplemental hand feeding, which again, I'm retired and it's easy for me to do. Sometimes I think it's too easy and maybe I do more of it than I should, but for the most part, they're good parents.
And for a fancy breed, you mentioned that the cocks will drive pretty good. So even when it comes to the breeding aspect of themselves, they're pretty prolific in that way. It doesn't take a lot of doing separations and encouragement and stuff like that to get them to breed.
No, they're pretty active and vigorous in that regard. I do trim the vents on the birds when I'm going to breed them, and I do that because I always go to the NPA National, and I don't mate up until the middle of February. I live in the southeast where it gets really hot. So by June, we are in 95-degree weather with real high humidity, and they're tired of breeding, and I'm tired of breeding them. So I have a relatively short breeding season. So I trim the vents to just make sure I get better chance at fertile eggs.
So based on your experience with these, someone who's coming into the showing world of it, would you suggest this breed as a novice pigeon fancier to start showing with?
Yes, they're not what I would call a kid's pigeon, like, say, performing rollers or racing homers or tipplers, birds that are just pretty much all you got to do is feed and water them and they'll breed like rats. Old German owls are a show breed, and like all show breeds, are a little bit more hands-on. You have to do a little bit more. You do have to baby them a little bit more, but they're certainly nothing compared to a fantail or a Jacobin or English trumpeters, where they have a lot of trimming and a lot of manipulation to get them to breed properly. They'll do a good job, and yes, I think a novice can do well with them as long as they have the interest to pursue them.
And one thing I forgot to ask earlier, I've never heard of the tail mic. That's really interesting. I'm going to look some of those up, but you had mentioned, some of the colors that come in on the windshield. What are the colors that do come in the old German owl breed?
All of the basic, we have all of the blue family of blue bar, blue checks. We even have blue barless that have done real well. The same thing in the ash reds, ash yellows, bars, checks. We have browns and khakis. We've got people now that are breeding Andalusians. We have grizzles and all of the base colors. Certainly blacks, reds, yellows that are solid shield colors. And they're like the black. You do see occasionally duns, the reds and the yellows. They're usually pretty strong entries. The bar colors, the blue bars and red bars, are probably the biggest classes at most of the shows. But we have rare colors too, as well. We've got people that are breeding Qualman and Dominant Opal and have done remarkably well in a relatively short period of time of introducing these new colors. And I know there's colors on the drawing board with people. They're working on Milky and Recessive Opal and things like that. So the future is really bright as far as the colors are concerned.
That's a lot more than I thought of. Yeah, I definitely see a lot of the reds at the shows and blacks. Those are pretty popular. If anybody's interested in finding out more about this, there is a national club. That's the Old German Owl Club. It's a really strong club. These guys are doing a lot of the shows. Their website is ogoc.org. They do have a Facebook too. Is that just under Old German Owl Facebook group?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Old German Owl Facebook group. So if you're interested in learning more about this breed and checking out that diagram that he mentioned, it is a really cool diagram. It shows a standard with all the information laid out around it. So as you're looking, you can just glance over, and absolutely, if you're getting into the breed, that's something that you definitely want to have handy. So Bill, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking Old German Owls today. Really appreciate it.
Well, it was a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me. I always love to talk about pigeons and specifically old German owls. It's a great breed, and I've thoroughly enjoyed them.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast. And make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.